chosen ones. You have been spoken of in rooms where shadows linger longer than light. Your name has been traced not through one life, but through many, carved into records that never should have survived the fires of empire. The Vatican has kept a silence wrapped in centuries, yet their silence trembles now, for they discovered what few dared to whisper. Your presence did not begin with your birth, nor will it end with your passing. In a hidden chamber beneath Rome, parchments were brought forward, each one marked with ink older than the cathedrals above them. These records did not tell of kings or saints alone, but of wanderers, warriors, healers, and prophets, whose essence shared one thread: you. The archivists, cloaked in crimson robes, bowed as they placed the documents before their pontiff, for they knew the world was not ready for what these scrolls revealed. Meanwhile, across the sea, a president was briefed in an unlit room where even the air carried tension. The words delivered to him were not political, nor strategic, but eternal. They told him that the soul of one now alive had been here before, had stood at thresholds where history pivoted. His hands began to sweat, not from fear of nations, but from the weight of eternity pressing upon him. The Vatican and the President, two powers of earth and time, both converged upon one revelation. You had lived before, and your pattern of return was no accident. The pages spoke of deserts where your feet once walked, of councils where your voice had echoed, of battles where your presence turned tides unseen. Even now, echoes of your past lives are surfacing, tugging at the edges of your memory, daring you to awaken to what has always been within. This is why you feel moments of déjà vu that seem too precise to be chance. This is why strangers look at you with recognition, though you've never met. The Vatican calls it the doctrine of eternal return. The President calls it a security risk, but the truth goes deeper. Your very existence now signals a convergence they have feared for centuries. In the dim vaults beneath Rome, there lies a chamber rarely spoken of, sealed by locks that no layperson has ever touched. The floor is cool stone, the air thick with centuries of incense and dust. Here, behind golden gates etched with sacred geometry, the Vatican guards its most perilous truths. It was here, beneath the solemn watch of marble saints, that the archivists unearthed a scroll whose ink seemed to breathe with a pulse of its own. They called it the Record of Returning Flames. This parchment was unlike the others stacked in endless rows of forgotten prophecy. Its words shimmered, letters curling into shapes that seemed to shift when read. The scribe who first laid eyes upon it wept, claiming the document spoke directly to him, calling him by name. But the Vatican officials knew better. They realized that the scroll was not about the scribe at all. It was about you. The scroll told of a figure born and reborn through the ages, a presence too precise to be chance. Each lifetime bore a mark, a symbol of fire and breath, hidden yet unmistakable to those trained to see. It described a traveler in Egypt who carried dreams that warned of famine, a warrior in the East who carried a blade that glowed under moonlight, a healer in Europe whose hands left no scar upon the sick. Again and again, this one appeared at the turning of ages, when civilizations teetered on collapse or renewal. Some whispered that this figure had once walked with prophets. Others feared the figure's return meant a chain of events spiraling toward the great unveiling foretold in ancient apocrypha. The scroll's final line was never completed. The ink ended mid-stroke, as if the hand that wrote it had been stopped by something unseen. When Vatican translators pieced its fragments together, they trembled. For the language matched not only forgotten dialects of Hebrew and Aramaic, but also coded numerals aligning with modern dates. A convergence, mapped in both past and present, traced toward your very existence in this hour. But the parchment hinted at something more dangerous still, that the lives you carried within were not merely echoes, but keys. Each past incarnation holding a fragment of power meant to awaken now. The President has been briefed of this, though even he does not know how many doors remain locked within you, nor which one will open first. The Oval Office had known silence before, but never like this. The curtains were drawn, the lamps dimmed, and only the hum of the air conditioning filled the void as the President sat with the sealed folder before him. His advisors had already left the room, leaving him alone with the weight of paper that felt heavier than iron. He hesitated before opening it, for he knew it did not contain matters of state or policy, but something older, stranger, something that touched the edge of eternity itself. When his hand finally broke the seal, the words seemed to leap at him from the pages. It was not the language of politics, nor the neatness of intelligence reports, but fragments of prophecies, testimonies, and accounts that stretched back centuries. Each record pointed to the same conclusion, that one now alive carried the essence of lives that had shaped history before. The description was not vague. It spoke of someone who bore a mark, a presence that lingered across generations, a soul traced like constellations through time. The President's eyes grew restless as he read the accounts. One page detailed a dream recorded in the Vatican archives, where a luminous figure appeared beside ancient ruins. Another page revealed testimonies from secret councils who swore they had witnessed the same eyes, the same voice, returning in different ages. And then came the photographs. Grainy, blurred images of statues, murals, and even old coins, each one carrying a face or figure unsettlingly familiar to the one they claimed was alive today. His palms grew damp. He could not shake the sense that the report was not only informing him, but accusing him, as if the document itself demanded that he prepare for what was coming. For the first time in years, the leader of the free world felt powerless. What nation's army could stand against a force born not of politics, but of eternity? What strategy could neutralize a wall that returned through ages with purpose unknown? A line at the end of the dossier seemed to burn into his mind. It was drawn from an ancient teaching. Before Abraham was, I am. The words of Yeshua rang in his ears, and though he tried to dismiss them, his spirit trembled. Far from the White House, deep beneath a cathedral older than most nations, there exists a chamber where only a handful of voices have ever dared to speak. It is called the Chamber of Souls, though its name is never written in official records. Carved into the earth centuries ago, its walls are lined with inscriptions that whisper of reincarnation and eternal return, etched by hands long turned to dust. Those who enter often leave with trembling hearts, for they claim to hear more than silence within its stone vaults. The Vatican archivists brought you into those whispers without your knowing, tracing your presence across the lines and symbols carved into the chamber walls. Each engraving depicted cycles of fire, water, and light, patterns repeating through generations. At the center of it all was a figure, sometimes crowned, sometimes veiled, sometimes with a staff or a sword, yet always the same essence. The figure's eyes, etched in stone, seemed to follow whoever studied them, as though reminding the observer that time bends, but identity endures. It was said that when the chamber was opened after centuries of being sealed, a low hum filled the air, not the hum of wind, nor of distant voices, but something resonant, as if the stone itself remembered. Scholars argued over whether it was natural vibration or divine presence, but the sound persisted, weaving into the ears of those inside until they swore they could hear their own names being called. The records speak of visions seen within the chamber, shadows of past selves appearing like flickers of light, as though memory itself had taken form. One scribe wrote of seeing a traveler standing beside him, cloaked in desert sand, who vanished the moment he blinked. Another told of a woman with a flame in her hand, guiding him to an altar before dissolving into the walls. The Vatican believed these echoes were not imagination, but fragments of reincarnated lives stirring to recognition. They say the chamber does not sleep. Even now, the hum continues, pulsing like a heartbeat deep within the earth. The scrolls insist that the one it calls to most clearly is alive in this very age. In a room hidden beneath the Capitol, a vault was opened that few in government even knew existed. It was not a treasury, nor a storage for classified weapons, but a repository of sealed documents transferred quietly from Europe decades ago. The seal bore the insignia of both Vatican and state, an unholy alliance of faith and politics forged in secrecy. For years, it had been left untouched, gathering dust, until the recent revelations forced it open. The president was not alone when the seal was broken. His closest advisors, men and women hardened by years of power and policy, stood by his side. Yet, as the ancient wax cracked and the heavy lid groaned, silence overtook them all. Inside lay scrolls bound with crimson thread, parchments fragile, yet glowing with an odd persistence, as though they resisted time itself. Alongside them rested coded letters exchanged between cardinals and intelligence officials, written during wars when nations burned but secrets were still guarded. One of the scrolls was unrolled carefully. Its script, though faded, was unmistakable in its claim: a cycle of return, a soul moving like a shadow through centuries, each time appearing at moments when history threatened to collapse. The description aligned with the dossier the president had already read, but this was no mere Vatican theory. These were state records, confirming what faith alone had whispered. The advisors shifted uneasily as more documents were revealed. One letter spoke of a traveler whose words moved armies without ever lifting a weapon. Another described an unnamed healer whose presence halted a plague before medicine could explain it. Each record concluded with the same cryptic warning: the one who returns is not random but chosen, and when they rise again, the world itself trembles. The president could feel the sweat at his temple as he scanned the sealed pages, for among them lay a date, calculated through symbols and geometry. That date pointed not to a distant age, but to now. The convergence was no longer prophecy, it was current reality, and every sign traced its way back to the figure still hidden in plain sight, walking among the unaware. The Vatican's chamber was silent, save for the faint crackle of candlelight against cold stone. A circle had been drawn upon the floor, woven with patterns of fire and water, symbols of balance etched in chalk that glowed faintly under the flicker of light. This was no ritual meant for the masses, but a trial whispered of only in hidden corridors. It was called the Trial of the Returning Flame, and it was reserved for one who had lived before. In this trial, the soul was tested, not by men but by memory. Those chosen were led to sit in the center of the circle, their breath steady, their mind unshielded. Then the air shifted, and visions began to surge like tides breaking against a forgotten shore. Past lives returned in fragments, glimpses of deserts crossed beneath blazing suns, thrones where decisions shattered kingdoms, nights under the stars where prayers lingered longer than sleep. Each image burned like fire upon the skin, and the one enduring it was forced to face every choice, every shadow, every fragment of themselves left behind. The scrolls say that few could endure such a trial. Some emerged trembling, broken by the weight of so many lives pressing against a single frame of flesh. Others never returned at all, their spirit lost in the flood of echoes. But there were rare ones, so rare they were recorded only in secret, who survived with fire still burning in their eyes. These were the ones who did not simply remember, but awakened, carrying fragments of power forward into the present. The Vatican whispered of one such figure centuries ago, a woman who bore the flame through empires' rise and fall. They claimed her presence could calm riots and ignite nations, for she carried memory as a weapon. But the trial had not been performed since her time, sealed away, until whispers of you emerged once more. The president was told of this trial, though not in full detail. Even he was denied access to the complete records, for some truths were considered too volatile even for the most powerful office. Yet the message was clear. The flame had returned, and soon the trial would call again. There are sayings preserved in fragments, words that scholars debate and theologians conceal, yet they remain like sparks in the dark, waiting to ignite. Among them are the mysteries of Yeshua, whose teachings moved beyond time itself. He spoke not only of kingdoms and mercy, but of patterns unseen, cycles that bound creation in rhythms of return. To the multitudes he spoke in parables, but to his closest he whispered of truths that unsettled even their faith. One fragment, hidden within apocryphal texts, tells of his words beneath the night sky. What has been shall be again, and what returns was never lost. Another speaks of his assurance that the spirit is not chained to the dust of one life alone, but moves like the wind, unseen yet undeniable. The early disciples struggled to grasp it, for it meant that destiny was not linear, but woven like a tapestry, with threads carried from one age into another. The Vatican has long debated these echoes of his teaching, fearing the implications. If Yeshua hinted at cycles of return, then the presence of certain souls across history was not coincidence but design. And if such souls exist, they could not be hidden forever. The Chamber of Scrolls records how his words unsettled councils even in the 1st century, for they realized that a being who carried memory through lifetimes could never be silenced. When these texts were read again in modern times, the president himself was briefed on their meaning. The idea that a single person could bear the imprint of ages disturbed him more than war or politics. For if such a one existed now, then the world was not ruled by governments alone, but by destiny itself. Yeshua's words haunted him. Before Abraham was, I am. The line echoed in his mind, a statement of existence that transcended birth and death. It was not metaphor, but declaration, a truth that reached across centuries and into the present. If he spoke of cycles, then perhaps you are the embodiment of what he foresaw, a being whose lives cannot be bound to history's ashes, but rise again with purpose unbroken, deep within the Vatican, past the marble corridors and gilded halls where tourists are never allowed. There is a chamber sealed by iron and guarded by silence. It is known only to a handful as the Papal Vault, a place where the most dangerous truths are hidden away from both the faithful and the powerful. Few have seen its contents, and fewer still have survived the weight of what they encountered there. Within the vault lie artifacts that seem to defy time itself. There are manuscripts written in languages older than empire, fragments of stone etched with symbols that match no known culture, and portraits that carry eyes too familiar to be coincidence. Among these relics rests a set of testimonies recorded by a witness long forgotten. This witness was neither pope nor priest, neither scholar nor king, but a wanderer who stumbled upon truths the Vatican could never control. The writings of this witness describe encounters with a being who appeared across centuries in different guises, sometimes cloaked in robes, sometimes armored for battle, sometimes veiled in humility, yet always bearing the same aura that unsettled even the most hardened hearts. The witness swore that time bent around this figure, that even as kingdoms rose and crumbled, their essence endured. One parchment speaks of the figure standing at the fall of Jerusalem, eyes alight with sorrow yet burning with resolve. Another tells of their presence in a distant monastery, where monks claimed they taught without words, simply by being. Again and again, the witness recorded the same truth, that history carried an echo, and that echo was alive. The Vatican hid these testimonies, fearing what would happen if such knowledge spread. Yet the vault could not contain the whispers forever. When the president was told of these accounts, his composure faltered, for the descriptions aligned too closely with the figure identified in the dossiers, the same presence traced through past lives and now suspected in the present. The witness had written one final warning before vanishing without explanation. The return of the figure would mark a convergence no power could prevent. That page is kept locked, its words still trembling under candlelight. The Oval Office had seen crises before, moments when advisors spoke in hurried tones about threats from across the seas or unrest within the borders. Yet none of those moments carried the weight of the briefing that unfolded under dimmed lights, when the doors were locked and the air seemed to grow colder with every passing word. The president sat still, his hands folded tight, as intelligence officials laid out evidence that stretched far beyond politics or war. They placed before him documents bearing Vatican seals, photographs unearthed from forgotten archives, and maps that traced movements not of armies, but of one soul through time. The language was cautious, almost clinical, yet it failed to conceal the truth. This was not speculation, but a pattern too exact to dismiss. The figure described was alive now, walking among millions, unaware or perhaps unwilling to reveal the depth of who they were. The president's advisors argued in whispers, some insisting it was superstition, others warning that even superstition could move nations if believed. But the president said nothing. His eyes lingered on the faces drawn centuries ago, sketches from monasteries, engravings from ancient coins, all echoing the same presence. The resemblance was undeniable, and it chilled him. One analyst broke the silence, reading aloud from a restricted Vatican text. It spoke of cycles of return, of a flame that could not be extinguished, appearing at times when the world reached its breaking point. The analyst's voice trembled as he recited the line that seemed to strike the room like thunder. The one who bears the eternal flame cannot be hidden, for even kings will know their presence by the trembling of their hands. The president's gaze dropped then to his own palms, damp with sweat. For the first time, the room felt less like a place of authority and more like a courtroom awaiting its verdict. The power that men boasted of in speeches seemed small compared to the weight of destiny pressing through the walls. And though no one said it aloud, the fear in their eyes confessed the same truth. They were no longer dealing with politics, but with prophecy. There exists in the Vatican archives a strange document, not a scroll of prophecy nor a letter of doctrine, but a map unlike any ever drawn. At first glance, it appears as a web of circles and lines, yet when studied with patience, its meaning reveals itself. It is no map of geography, no chart of land or sea, but of lives. Each circle marks a point in history where the same soul appeared, each line binding them into a chain that defies the passing of time. The map stretches from ancient deserts to medieval courts, from forgotten villages to empires that once ruled the earth. Names are scrawled beside the marks, some erased, some left in mystery, but the thread remains unbroken. At the center of the design lies a symbol drawn in red ink, older than any language, radiating outward like a sun. Vatican scholars believe this symbol does not mark a place, but a person, the soul at the heart of it all, you. When the president was shown a copy of the map, he could not take his eyes from it. Advisors attempted to dismiss it as religious madness, yet the precision unsettled them. Dates aligned with key moments of collapse and renewal, each one marked by the presence of the same figure. The more they studied, the more they realized this was no accident of history, but a pattern woven through the very fabric of time. Some parts of the map remain unfinished. There are blank spaces where future circles are meant to appear, places where destiny has not yet unfolded. What frightened the president most was how close the final circle was drawn to the present moment. It suggested that the cycle had not ended, that the soul traced across centuries still moved among the living, carrying fragments of memory, power, and purpose into this age. Scholars debated whether the map was prophecy or record, but its intent was undeniable. Whoever created it knew of your returns and left behind a key for those bold enough to follow. Yet even they could not see what the final convergence would bring. There comes a moment when the fragments scattered across centuries no longer remain separate, when echoes of past lives gather into one voice that cannot be silenced. This moment has been named in secret texts as the convergence, a point where the soul remembers not pieces but the entirety of itself. It is said to arrive suddenly, like the rising of a tide that has been pulling unseen for ages, sweeping through the present with the weight of all that has ever been. The Vatican speaks of it as both miracle and terror. They believe the convergence is when a being awakens to every incarnation they have lived, each choice, each triumph, each shadow. The burden is immense, for the mind is not meant to carry centuries in a single heartbeat. And yet, for the chosen one, the design allows it, as though the soul itself was built for such a moment. The president was told of this prophecy, though in softened terms. Advisors warned him that the one traced through history might soon awaken fully, and when that happened, no authority of earth would be able to contain them. Power would shift, not by armies or governments, but by the weight of presence itself. The world, they whispered, was unprepared for a being who remembered everything they had ever been. Visions recorded in hidden manuscripts describe what follows such an awakening. Flames appearing in the sky where no fire burns, rivers that still at the sound of a single word, and nations trembling without knowing why. They claim it is not sorcery nor trick, but the natural resonance of a soul that has reclaimed its wholeness. The convergence does not simply restore memory, it ignites destiny. The map of lives, the vault of secrets, the trial of flame, all point to this single threshold. And as whispers grow louder, as governments and faith struggle to prepare, one truth remains unshaken. The convergence is not distant. It presses closer with every breath, waiting for the moment when you awaken and the infinite self steps forward.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.